And what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Designated Players and MLS podcast. We are here joined by a very special guest, Connor Wright, hailing from Long Island, joining us for what, the first time ever? I don't think we've ever actually met before. How are you?
What, I missed one game or I missed one week and all of a sudden now I'm a special guest on the
I
podcast?
mean, listen, like if I had to once again toss it on my back and carry the pod. That's just, it's par for the course at this point.
I mean, listen, you want to call yourself the leader of the podcast. Sometimes you got to act like the leader.
Listen, that's totally fair, but here's the deal, right? If you're a part of it, talk to me. You went on vacation.
I
What sort of
did.
scarf did you bring back?
I did not bring back a scarf.
Ah, see, exactly. No dedication to the cause.
Well, okay, so here is the issue, right? I had it perfectly lined up where I was going to be in San Jose for decision day, but they're playing in LA. I 100% would have been there had they been playing at home
And
because
you
I'm
could
sure the
have.
tickets would be dirt cheap and it would be a great opportunity to go see the stadium while it's pretty empty, I'm sure.
I was just about to say you could have gotten those tickets for the change that you find on the ground and still had money left over for food.
Yeah, they'd have to pay me to go.
Oh man, that's funny. Well, speaking of bad teams, today's episode is the final installment of what went wrong. Two more teams have been eliminated from the playoffs. It is Philadelphia and it is DC United. We're just going to go back and continue our What Went Wrong series and talk about how these teams messed up 2024 so bad that they are no longer playing. But before we do that, of course, got to go hit scarf of the week. I thought we would see a new scarf today. We clearly didn't, even though Connor could have gone right up to the stadium and bought a nice San Jose scarf to talk exactly about this topic.
But it wouldn't make sense. We're not talking about San Jose today. So even if I got a new scarf, I wouldn't bring it out this episode.
Well, it's kind of weird because I can already tell you that we're not talking about the team on your neck. So
I wish we were, but we are not.
stretch.
I don't own a DC United or a Philly scarf, so I am stretching for this one. I'm going for the Red Bull scarf because DC's head coach is former Red Bull.
Nice. Good stretch. Good stretch. Um, I went with a team that was really unlucky. That Brad Guzan decided to turn back the clock 30 years and pretend that he's 65 years old again and are no longer playing. We won't be talking about them in this series, but we got, oh Lord,
Oh,
I
you
messed
messed
it
it
up
up.
again. There we go. Well,
Dude,
Montreal,
Brad Guzan's another animal now. He really turned back the clock.
yeah,
It's like he's 30 again.
dude, he looked so good against Miami, like to the point where I was like, drug testing. There's only one way. Well, here's the deal, right? If we're talking about who the best player in the world is at this current moment or in history, there are two players that come to mind, right?
Brad Guzan.
Lionel Messi, who shows up, doesn't show up in the playoffs, right?
Yeah, dude,
Absolute stinker in the playoffs.
wrong.
Can't beat 40-year-old bald Brad Guzan and is what relying on 39-year-old Luis Suarez to carry the load. Fraud, right?
Wrong.
You know who has played against 40-year-old bald Brad Guzan, scored a goal, and shows up in the playoffs when you need him most?
I feel like that last part is not going to be true, but go ahead. Who is it?
His name is Dante Van Zier. And if
Yeah,
we're talking about the
I
GOAT,
figured that.
we're talking about the GOAT. It's who can be obviously the decision on who the best player in the world is who can score on Brad Guzan.
Has Dante even played a playoff game yet?
Yeah, he played last year.
Oh, he did?
Yeah,
How'd that
didn't
go?
do much, but he didn't do much.
So when you
Uh,
say he showed up, you literally mean he showed up.
he was there.
He was
And
there.
listen, well, here's the thing, right? He got overshadowed by the true GOAT. Tom Barlow scored in those games.
Tom
Not.
Barlow scored in those
Bro,
games?
I watched Tom Barlow score a goal in real
Like
life. It was the most
plural
insane thing.
games?
It was the most insane thing I've ever seen in my life. I was sitting there with my dad watching Tom Barlow kick a ball over the line in between the white posts in a soccer game. It was crazy. It was just the peach on top of a terrible playoff performance.
I mean,
Uh,
he scored this year, didn't he? He scored against what's that team in red? I don't know, might have a scarf around my neck for them.
Don't know what you're talking about, but we should move on to the topics because this has gotten drastically off course and not in the way I wanted it to. But we can celebrate because the scum are out. DC United eliminated on decision day after being one of the most active teams in the offseason leading up to 2024, hiring a brand new coach, leaning on the strength of star designated player like Christian Benteke. They still didn't have what it takes to get into the playoffs for the fifth time in a row. They haven't made it since 2019. They are now preparing for next season and are not messing around. They've cleared out nearly every one of the players that were here over the last two seasons to prepare for 2025 rebuild. But let's look back at 2024 and see what went wrong. Mr. Wright,
Is that my cue to start?
listen, I know you missed a week. I know you haven't done this in a while, but usually when I stop talking, you start talking. That's how this works.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
All right. So for my first point here, I've gone for terrible keeping. And I was very tempted to just title this whole section Trash Defense and just go in on the defense as a whole, just considering the fact that they conceded 70
Oh
goals.
my
But
God, I didn't even realize that.
I know it's a lot.
Bro,
70
they
goals is
they
insane.
make San Jose look like they were half competent. I didn't think they hit 70. I didn't even see that.
I- It's insane to me that I think there might even be more. I have to look, but three teams conceded 70 goals this year.
That's stupid.
That's insane. But anyway, yeah, so DC conceded 70 goals this year. But what I looked at was their expected goals conceded, or I think it's technically expected goals against. And I found that they were only expected to concede 51.3 goals. Now, obviously, this is a subjective stat, so you can say what you want about it. But again, general trend to me says that this defense should have been better than the one that conceded 70 goals this season. So the way I interpreted this was I feel like it says the defense wasn't too bad. I'm not saying they're great. 51.3 expected goals against is still not great, but that's a lot more par of the course for the league. To me, it says that the keepers let them down. And looking at the stats, it definitely feels like that's the case because neither Bono nor Miller managed to crack 60% save percentage. Additionally, they only combined across the entire 34 game season for two clean sheets. Two. And if we're talking goalkeeper stats, I would be remiss if I did not mention that the two goalkeepers combined for a negative 7.4 PSXG plus minus. So I think I can't remember if you had tweeted this or if you just told it to me separately, but you had talked about them needing to sign a goalkeeper. I think maybe that part of their moves for the offseason was clearing out the goalkeeper spot. So looks like they are maybe doing an overhaul there, but I definitely think that was much needed to get something different in the goal because neither one of these guys was cutting it last season.
You really missed an entire week just to go steal my notes and go basically word for word what I was going to say. That's
Listen, I got to pick
crazy.
up where I left off.
That's crazy. I will say that there was only one other year where three teams gave up 70 or more goals, and that was 2018. Orlando City 74, Minnesota and San Jose 2018. What's absolutely criminal is there are teams on here multiple times. So San Jose's on here twice, DC's on here twice, FC Cincinnati's on here twice, Minnesota's on here twice. Like, learn your lesson, people.
Nah.
Goodness me. And all within 2017 or earlier, or later, I mean, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, the goal scoring has gone through the roof in the last like 7 or so years.
Yeah, crazy, crazy. But yeah, listen, poor goalkeeper work is exactly what I had as one of my points. It is not a shock to me that DC United is heading into 2025 with zero goalkeepers on their roster. They have cleared them all out and said we are starting from scratch, and that doesn't shock me in the slightest. You were right. I've been on record stating at how underwhelming they've been for a while now. Even back in the Rooney days, I was like, you can't run with Miller and Bono. They're just not cutting it. You need to do something better. And they never did. Both of them bottom 10 PSXG plus minus, like you mentioned. And listen, there are some goalkeepers like Carlos Cornell's really, really down bad this year. He's really low on that stat. And it's a one off. Like he's been pretty good for his entire Red Bull career, but this is not shocking for either DC goalkeeper. Tyler Miller, who got the majority of the starts in DC last year, he posted a -3 PSXG plus minus in 2023 and was bottom five of all consistent starters, right? They were both really bang average in 2022 when they were with TFC in Minnesota. But you combine that with the fact that they also gave out the second most goals from outside the box in 2024. Only one of those sides who were in that top five made the playoffs, who gave up the most goals from outside the box, and they just lost 5-0 at the hands of their own rival. So clearly, it's a stat that's a little bit telling, and a new goalkeeper is going to be very, very important for 2025. What
Yeah,
else you got?
totally
What
agree.
else you got?
Possibly another repeat with you here, but too much reliance on one player. And we've seen this with some other teams. I mean, we've covered it with other teams just this year when doing our what went wrong series, but a reliance on one player to perform is just not going to work, especially in the long term. We've seen that with Nashville. I mean, people eventually started to figure out Hani, and the team is now out of the playoffs and in rough shape. I mean, I think there's still like we talked about them, so you can refer back to that. But there's a path forward for them, I think still. But Benteke was a beast this year. I mean, 23 goals, taking home the Golden Boot, and yet his team still couldn't even make the playoffs because I think the rest of the people around him just couldn't step up enough. And I did a little bit of research. I know, shocking, but you know the last team that had a Golden Boot and missed the playoffs. I'll give you a chance if you want to take a guess at it.
Would it be 2013 Camilo Sanvezo for Vancouver?
That is a fantastic guess because you are spot on, sir. It was. It was 2013 Vancouver for Camilo. Probably not the team you want to be compared to. But yeah, they need to get Benteke more help. Otherwise, I think teams are going to eventually start to figure him out. And if that happens, I think this team will be in tough shape because they with as great as Benteke was this season, they still couldn't even get in the playoffs.
Not only did you steal my point, but you literally stole my fun stat that I was going to have you guess. Literally,
Is that why you knew
oh,
it?
off the top of my head, like I literally was like, oh man, that'd be really funny to bring in and be like, oh, what? And then be like, wow, it's been that long. Like, no way. I literally had it written there. Yeah, so I again over reliance on Benteke. He is an animal, right? The Aerials one stat is insane. Having 200 headers won over his next closest player is mental. And like you mentioned, the Golden Boot and 23 isn't crazy, right? Like that's not even probably top 10 in the most goals to win a Golden Boot, right? Like it's not crazy, but it was still the best of the best for the year. And yeah, Camilo was the last time that happened, and DC repeated because that's all they had. He scored 25 times in all competitions, and the next closest was six from Pirani. Like, if it wasn't for Benteke, it wasn't anyone that was going to score. And you can't solo your way to MLS Cup or the playoffs. They were one dimensional. If you had a center back who could mark Benteke out or provide, take away any of his very, very limited service, you basically had DC who couldn't attack. So, um, you're going to want to see a little bit more investment in fixing that in 2025. Please do not steal my anything clever from my last point.
I hope we have the same one. That would be
I hope
fantastic.
we do too. Just don't be clever about it.
All right, my last point here is gotta win your home games. And I think it's pretty self-explanatory in the title, but you need to win your home games if you're going to make the playoffs. And DC did not do that. And they finished the season with 4 home wins all year, which, by the way, is on par with San Jose. And we've talked about how awful San Jose was this year. So, not someone you want to be on par with. But no team in the last decade has made the playoffs with only 4 wins at home. I mean, heck, some seasons there isn't even a single team in the entire league with less than 5 wins at home. So, not only is dropping points at home bad for team morale, but for fan morale as well. I mean, that's not going to get fans excited about the team if every time you go to watch them play at home, they lose or drop points. They need to start winning at home. Otherwise, I truly believe they will never make the playoffs.
We don't have the same one. We're good.
Yes,
But
finally.
mine's relatively close, and it's inability to hold on to a lead, right? So for those of you who don't know, if you kick the ball between the white posts, you get a goal. And the objective of the game is to make sure that the other team doesn't kick the ball between the white posts on your side anymore, right? Once you take the lead, you don't want it to go away. And unfortunately for DC, they weren't very good at understanding this concept. They lost the fourth most points from winning positions in 2024 with 24 points dropped. Now, you can also say that they gained the 20 points from losing positions and their overlapping stats, right? Where you can go up 2-1, then go down 3-2 and tie 3-3. And I guess technically you've lost 2 points from a winning position, but you've also gained a point from a losing position. So, I mean, that stuff kind of overlaps. But either way, your inability to be composed and dominant with any sort of lead killed them in 2024. And it's a learning point, right? Head coach Troy Lesesne, only in his second year, really 1.5 years of being a head coach, learning about how to have a strong mentality in these moments and how to direct the game is going to be important. But you also can't give him that much time because you got to figure this out. You haven't made the playoffs in 5 years. You don't want to go down a Chicago route, right?
Nobody wants to go down a Chicago route.
Well, I mean, Greg does apparently, but
That's true. He's the only one brave enough to face that challenge.
listen, my hero, my legend, right?
He's
Um,
just getting warmed up for his third stint with the USMNT. That's all.
but let's leave those dreams of Greg's return to the men's national team and what Twitter would melt into if that happened. Let's leave those in the past and let's go talk about the Philadelphia Union, who were also eliminated on decision day, just 2 years removed from the MLS Cup final and 4 years from their first Supporters Shield. They are watching the playoffs from home. They've been one of the most dominant sides over the last 5 years, finishing no lower than fourth in the East and sixth overall. However, this was the pinnacle of MLS success on a budget, right? However, that shoestring budget and Jim Curtin's magic seemed to have run out, and Philly couldn't handle it. While fans are hoping for big investment in 2025, let's look back at what went wrong in 2024.
I like a cue. You can cue me. Well, the audio listeners can't hear that.
They heard the snap.
I didn't hear the snap, but I'll take your word for it. I'll take your word for it. But yeah. So my first point for the Union is a lack of consistency. So the Union had 5 wins this season by 3 goals or more. Mind you, they've only had 9 wins the entire year. So majority of their wins have been blowouts. And you look at the fact that they finished the season with a 7 goal difference and still managed to finish, sorry, with a positive 7 goal difference, let me specify there, and still managed to finish 12th in the East. I mean, that to me says that when they were on, they were dominating and they looked like the team that we've known for the past few seasons. But the problem is they couldn't play like that consistently. I mean, their longest win streak this season was only 3 games. And if you can't build any consistency, you're not going to be able to succeed, and you're not going to be able to get into the playoffs.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. Yeah, I mean, I was gonna just basically repeat what you just said, right? If you aren't consistent, you can't get into a good flow of what you're trying to do. The Philly were also missing that guy for them, and that guy is three-time goalkeeper of the year, Andre Blake. So this section is titled "No Goalkeeper of the Year." Listen, Andre Blake, we know what his level is. We know how wonderful of a tool he is to have in the toolbox to keep you in games and steal points. He only got to make 14 appearances this season due to injury, and it showed in the box score. We thought that Oliver Semle or Semle, I don't know how you pronounce that properly, but we thought that he was going to be the guy. He had like the first 2 games, he looked so good, made some really good saves, but he fell off drastically. And it was left to a homegrown goalkeeper, Andrew Rick, to hold it all together. And he did well. I thought he was really, really solid and probably good enough to be the backup for Blake, but he didn't do well enough. Philly, like DC, had trouble keeping the ball out of the net from distance, and they led the league in goals conceded from outside the 18. They had 15 goals conceded from outside the 18. Of those 15, 10 were against Oliver Semle. four against Blake and one against Andrew Rick. But there's a clear drop off in Semley who hurt Philly, who were so used to having that level of quality at Andre Blake. And it's almost, when easy or goals that you expect to be saved go in, the level drops. And instead of fighting to get something back, you're pretty much saying, okay, this is it, we're done, and that's tough. And when you do that 10 times, that's really tough, and it puts you behind the eight ball for sure.
I don't like this. I
Oh,
don't like this.
oh, did I take it from you?
You absolutely did. You stole
How's it
my
how's it
segment.
how's it feel? How's it feel?
I don't like it. I don't like it.
Wah.
I'm gonna go back on vacation. I don't like this anymore. That's it. This is my final episode. Thanks, everybody.
Oh, thank God. Is that all it took?
But yeah, I have the same thing. I titled it "Not Enough Andre Blake," and as you said, you're missing one of the greatest goalkeepers in MLS history for about half of the season. That's a big loss. And as you said, Semley was the majority starter when he was out, and he was pretty average, I think, when looking at his stats. And when you compare that to the really high bar that Andre Blake sets, it's definitely a downgrade. And as you mentioned as well, Andrew Rick came in, and stats wise, he was pretty average. But I mean, that's not such a bad thing for an 18-year-old to come in and put in pretty like league wide like standard goalkeeping stats. So that's at least an encouraging sign for Philly there. But I mean, I could say with full confidence that I think that a full season of Andre Blake in net gets this team into the playoffs. So
Oh,
missing
100%.
him for half the year it hurt a lot.
Yeah, 100%. And it also, you pair that with the regression of the entire back line, which is my second point, but specifically on Jack Elliott and Glee's knees over there. They were once 1 and 2 for Defensive Player of the Year voting, so much so that you actually confused who actually won Defensive Player of the Year when
You
picking
had
them
to
for
slip that
your.
in there, didn't
Oh,
you?
did I say that out loud? That was supposed to be quiet. I'm sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but they were shells of themselves this year. Like Glesnes was the fourth most dribbled by player in the league per 90. They were both bottom 25 in aerials one. That is something that I remember them most clearly for back in their best days. You know, their lack of ability led to 55 goals conceded, which is the most by a significant margin since joining up in 2020 together. They didn't have a lot of depth there either. Their one signing that they had that was supposed to be their depth piece didn't pan out, and they sold Damian Lowe. So it might be worth having a look heading into 2025 for sure.
I like the way you transitioned into that one.
Thanks, man.
I
That's
don't have a transition, but it
boo.
is along the lines of something you covered with DC, and it's that they were missing the clutch gene this season. And to me, this works in two ways. So the first comes from, and I'll give credit because I know you referenced it, but you didn't give credit to him. A Tommy Scoops tweet where
Mm-hmm.
he shows that the Union are the team in the league with the most points dropped from winning positions throughout this season, with 27 points. Their inability to close out games caught up to them and ultimately knocked them out. I mean, Philly has a history of success, so it's not like this team isn't capable of closing things out. But for whatever reason this year, and maybe it's the mentality thing that you were talking about before with bad goals being conceded, they just weren't able to see it out this year in a lot of instances. And the second way for me that they weren't clutch was the end of this year. So Philly missed out on a play-in spot by 3 points, meaning if they just got one more win, they would have been in. And their last four games in the season, they only managed to get 1 point. I mean, and that includes dropping points at home to Atlanta, who was a team rivaling them for a playing spot. I mean, they should have almost certainly managed to find their way at least into a playing game with four games left when you only needed to get 4 points out of those games. So definitely feels like they weren't clutch in specific like individual game moments and also just in the season as a whole.
If you're not able to pull out a ton of consistency, then you're gonna run into some problems because you can't get into that rhythm and you can't be successful. You're right, just like DC did, and there's a reason they finished as close together as they did. Right. I saved the obvious one for last. The lack of quality depth, right? We all love the storyline of them defying the odds and winning the league with the most homegrowns and, being so good for 5 years with one of the lowest payrolls in the league. But the problem is that when that doesn't work out, you need to turn to somebody to change the tide of a game or even a season. And if your entire bench is teenage academy kids, you're in for a bad time. As I can attest to watching it the entire season. Um, Philly were only underspent by Montreal in 2024. There's my connection, by the way. That's definitely what I planned on doing, and I totally remember that I wrote that. Um, and that's been the case over the last few seasons. They've always been bottom half or bottom five in net spend. And when you look at who their first sub off the bench was most of the time, it was either really old, 37-year-old Ali Bedoya, or really really young in 20-year-old Quinn Sullivan. The problem is with Philly, they've got five players on TAM deals, one U22 player, and two designated players after Carranza was gone. This is a team all about the youth development and all this stuff. You got one U22 player? Are you kidding? I know they just signed Quinn Sullivan to a U22 deal, but that your whole business model is buy young, buy low, sell high. And you got one U22? That's mental.
Oh,
And they
I
don't
think.
even
Sorry, go ahead.
I
Finish
was
your
gonna
thought.
say they don't even have a ton of homegrowns either. Like most of their homegrowns went out on load. So the middle of that roster was just uninspiring and completely mid. And as I look to build for 2025, it's not really needing, to my opinion, like this big hitting, big number 10 that's going to change the game. But you got to go get three or four solid middle pieces, like guys that you can either start at a quality level or bring off the bench and be game changers. Because you don't need a big hitter, you need like legitimate depth.
Yeah, I mean, you need to bring in guys like Sam Adeniran. I think that was a good addition for them to bring in when you lost Carranza and you went down the route of going with Ty Barabo as the replacement starter there. And I think Adeniran was a good piece to add in there. But more guys like that to fill out the depth, I think I'm on board with that as well. But the one thing I was going to say is I feel like Philly isn't big on like buying young players as opposed to like just developing them through their academy. And I am definitely not opposed to them taking academy guys that flourish like Quinn Sullivan, like exactly what they did with Quinn Sullivan and giving those players the U22 spots. Like I'm totally on board for that. I don't think they have to go like find some young South American player and use it on him. But I agree with you. I think they should be using it. Like if guys aren't ready from the academy yet to fill that spot, why not just go find somebody else to do it at least in the short term, as opposed to just not using it at all.
Yeah, 100%, right? Like, and this is the thing that kills me about like the conversation, like, oh, what does MLS need to do to maximize the most of their roster rules? Like, they need to add this, add that. Adding things means nothing because that doesn't mandate that they use them. You know, like you can add 100 DP slots if you want. Red Bull's still only going to fill one. Like it just doesn't make them do that. That's why I like this idea of like the floor ceiling combos. So anyways, that's a different conversation for another day.
Hmm.
Speaking of another day, make sure you are around for that because we got some more fun stuff coming up. I don't know. I'm tired. It's been a long day.
Just make sure you're around someday. Some one of
Yeah,
these
it'll
we're
be
gonna be out
there.
there.
Yeah, and listen, you want to be around on any random day, make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts because that's how you know when the next day you need to be here is. How's that? That was pretty
That's
good.
true. It's true.
Just hit a subscribe. And you know what? On podcast apps, they have these like star ratings, 5 stars or whatever. Why don't you just throw us a couple stars, right? Let us know that you like our show. That'd be really fun.
Yeah,
And
one
then
one one subscribe equals one nap that Andrew gets to take. So please subscribe for his sake.
I need it. It's been I've been up since 6:30 this morning. It's now 10. Um, the uh, the other thing you want to do, come interact with us. Find us on social media. Find us on Twitter. Find us on TikTok. Find us on YouTube. We are pushing, unbelievably, we are pushing some great numbers on social media. Um, to 672 Twitter followers, which is insane because I barely tweet anymore. And we just hit 560 subs on YouTube. So help us get to 600 on YouTube. Help us get to 700 on Twitter because even numbers are fun, and I don't like these weird random numbers that aren't even. So let's fix that,
I
okay?
agree. I
Yeah,
agree.
my little brain don't like that. So let's fix
No.
that, I think. Sound good?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, and I know all of our fans just said, "Yep, sounds good too." So,
Yep.
um, we'll leave that to you. We'll see our subscription numbers go up, and we will see you next time on the next episode of the Designated Players and MLS podcast. See ya.